Today I'm going to show you how to put all this into either of these cars. Won't you be, please won't you be my neighbor? Hi neighbors. Starting off any car journey, whether it be for touring or daily driving, the first thing you have to do is make sure you're wearing a nice, comfortable, appropriate pair of shoes. So I'll show you here what I have. These shoes right here. And I'll show you very closely how they work. They're particularly narrow. They've got gripping on the heel for good control and actually leather bottoms. Very nice shoes. Lots of them available in the market, but these are the ones I chose. When I first got the Lotus Elise, it was a little bit challenging for me to operate the accelerator and the brake and the clutch because those pedals are very small and very tight together. So getting a pair of shoes like this, special driving shoes, was absolutely critical. Nowadays, I really don't have any challenges driving the car. I'm very comfortable with it. In fact, I can drive it wearing flip-flops or tennis shoes or just about anything. The other thing that I wanted to add at this point was that I really wanted to make this video in conjunction with a trip out to the tail of the dragon. But as you can see, I had a little problem here. I sprained my wrist this week playing volleyball. And I really wanted to do Tail of the Dragon before the weather gets colder, but I thought it's probably not a good idea because it's 5.5 hours there, 5.5 hours back, and then the time on the road. So I was just afraid that that might make my wrist even worse, and I'd better not risk it. So at any rate, I wasn't able to make that trip, but I am making this video anyhow and giving you the tips that I have about touring or daily driving the Alfa Romeo 4C and the Lotus Elise. Today I'm going to show you how to put all this into either of these cars. We have some hard case suitcases, we have some backpacks, this is a giant duffel bag. This is actually the soft top for the Lotus. I've got a caddy down there, that is a miniature camp chair. There's a larger camp chair in here. As we get started, I'm going to talk about several of these items. For example, over here we have some hard case suitcases. These are your typical Rollaboards. They're not particularly large, but a lot of people like to travel with these things. And so I'll just see how these will fit in the cars. So this one fits just fine in the Alfa Romeo. Too tall for the Lotus this way, but actually it can lay down like that and I should be able to close the lid just barely. Okay, I'm going to put that to the side now because actually I don't recommend hard case suitcases for efficiency or for these cars in any case, right? I think that is just the wrong approach. What you want is something that is soft and pliable so that you can squish it and move it and fit things close together and you'll get the maximum packing for the minimum amount of space. Okay, so I'm going to take this one also and put it off to the side. This one I think probably will fit in the Alfa Romeo. Yep, it will. So right off the bat, I can say that the Alfa Romeo is a little bit better in terms of just putting a traditional rollerboard into. Okay, but again, not the way I would pack. So my preferred method of packing is using soft objects, such as duffel bags like this one, or backpacks like this one. If you look at this backpack, I think it's a 20-liter backpack, and I use this to pack for a 3-week trip in Europe. So as you can imagine, I'm a pretty efficient packer, but I would challenge you with these cars to try and think in terms of things that are flexible and being efficient in your packing. Similarly, this Osprey backpack has served me well for many years. It's got great compartment to protect your laptop or Kindle, and I'll use this for a 4 or 5 day trip any day. The other thing that really helps when packing with backpacks and things like this is to use packing cubes. And this is an example of a packing cube, but it's basically, they come in many sizes. You can put all your stuff in there and then pull it out of your suitcase or your backpack and then organize it that way. It makes it really easy to keep things organized. So for example, in here, I've got actually 3 different of those packing cubes. And whenever I get to my destination, I just pull those out, put them on the dresser. I can live out of those, pack it back in. So I guess the first thing to knock out is if we're going topless with the Lotus Elise, then we do need to take the soft top with. One of the great things about the Lotus Elise in terms of storage is that in the trunk, you're not actually limited to this small little well here. They have the whole back end hollowed out. So you do have a couple things in the way. For example, the battery is right here. But other than that, you really have all this space under here. In fact, if you look under there, you can see the aluminum wheel well. So if I take the soft top, I can stick it in here and I can really, tuck it out of the way, right? So I've still got my main compartment storage space. And I can take a very large duffel like this one and it'll fit in here, right? It'd be a little snug to close this on it, but it would close. Alternatively, if I use my backpacks, these will fit in here quite easily, right? And I can actually shove them to the side and put another backpack in there, right? And so you can see that would fit very well. And there's even a little bit of room for a couple other little knickknacks and doodads if you need to fit them in there, okay? So lots and lots of space in the Lotus Elise trunk. Let's talk about how I use this on a daily basis too. So I don't usually take big packed backpacks with me on a daily basis. But one of the things I do on a daily basis is play volleyball. And I play volleyball and commute daily in both of these cars. One of the things I use is a volleyball bag. And this has changed over the years to be different types of bags, backpacks, what have you. But they're all a similar size, kind of like this. I've got 1 or 2 volleyballs in here and all kinds of other volleyball gear. I've got, knee braces, wrist braces, all kinds of, medical supplies in case. I've got rain covers in case it rains. I've got sand socks for the winter and hats and gloves for when it's cold. Just about anything I might need year-round to play volleyball outdoors. So I can take this bag, I can stick it right in here. This closes no problem. Even with 2 volleyballs, it would fit just fine. Okay, and as I said, if I really needed to fit more stuff in here, this can be tucked out of the way, right? So I've got the soft top in here, I've got my volleyball bag in here, and I could still fit one of these backpacks in here, right? And I would be able to close that. So those are some ideas. I would even go so far as to say, so this is the largest packing cube I have. They usually sell these in sets that are nested. So you have very large ones, medium ones, small ones, and then teeny tiny ones for various purposes. So you can have ones for clothes, they have ones for dirty laundry, ones for toiletries, ones for shoes, etc. I would go so far as to say, if you really want to get the most out of packing into a car like the Lotus Elise, get a bunch of the larger packing cubes. That way you can fill them full of your stuff. You can just shove them in here wherever they fit. And when you get to your destination, they all have handles. Or if you wanted to, you could get one big bag, like a laundry bag or a big duffel bag, and just put all the packing cubes in there and go into your hotel or wherever it is you're going. So I think that might be a good idea. I've never done it, but I kind of like the idea myself. And I love these packing cubes. This was a suggestion of a guy I went hiking with in the Inca Trail last year. And I've been using these for all my travels ever since, and they've been great. So highly recommend them. Another thing that I like to bring with me to volleyball is a camp chair. Your traditional camp chair may not fit into one of these cars. This is just sort of an average camp chair that I got free from some company that I worked for. So in this one, if I have my volleyball bag in here, there's probably not quite enough room to fit this in. Let me see. I think maybe if I put it in this way, I'll be darned. So it did actually fit in there. Now, I will disclose that normally I have a little caddy that sticks over in this side, and it contains, emergency supplies, spare parts, a few tools, things like that. So I've taken that out just to show you what can fit in the car. But normally I have that in there, and so this camp chair would not normally fit in there with my volleyball bag. That's why I have a separate duffel that I'll show you in a little bit. But with a little bit of looking, you actually can find a smaller camp chair that would fit easily in these cars. Now the Lotus, as I said, has a little bit more room in terms of length because you can tuck things underneath the edge there, but the Alfa Romeo is very tight and very specific. So there's very tight limitations on length of what you can fit into the trunk. And so I did find this little camp chair, which I'll show you in a little bit, but it works great, and it even fits really great in here too. But when I have a choice, I'll take my normal size camp chair because I'm a fairly tall person and this one is pretty close to the ground. Okay, let's talk about traveling in the Alfa Romeo 4C for a minute. If you're taking a long trip, then obviously you could fit a large duffel bag in here. So one of the things that's different about the Alfa Romeo 4C from the Lotus is that the trunk area has straight sides, so there's no way to tuck anything underneath, and you're really limited to the same dimensions as the opening here, okay? But I would definitely not recommend storing anything in here if you go to the grocery store. Nothing perishable, nothing that needs to be kept cool, definitely no ice cream. It would be a big mistake because the engines are right next to these trunk areas. So it does get warm back here. I admit I have stored some electronics back here on long trips and some other things that maybe I shouldn't have. I definitely kind of thought about it afterwards, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And they did fine. Nothing has been damaged to my knowledge. They did come out warm though. And so I would just not recommend it if you can avoid it, right? So keep all that stuff in the cabin with you. Large duffel fits just fine. If you're traveling with the backpacks, which is sort of my preferred method of traveling, right? You can fit one backpack there. And then if you've got another backpack, that'll nest right on top just like that. So no problem, and there's even plenty of little nooks and crannies where you can add things. You know, for example, I could put a thermos in here, there's plenty of room there, whatever you may have. Now, if you're using the 4C as your daily driver and you need to go hiking, or in my case, play volleyball or something like that, it also works very well for that. So I've got my handy dandy volleyball bag, which I can put in here just like that. And then I also have this miniature camp chair, which I can snuggle in right here, no problem. And there's actually still plenty of room here. I mean, I could probably still fit, you know, a backpack on top of this, right? So it might be a little tight, but if I didn't have the backpack as stuffed as it is right now, it probably would fit just fine. So that gives you an idea of what you can fit in the trunk for touring. So I have my production notes here. I guess you could call it a script for making this video, and just going through here to make sure that I'm covering everything that I wanted to. One of the things I wanted to share was just some of the trips that I have taken in these two cars, because I have used them quite a bit. I'm not really the touring type of person. I'm really more of a destination driver. So for me, you know, driving long periods on a highway is not very exciting. I really want to drive fast on curvy roads and have fun. So that's just to kind of tell you a little bit more about me. The other thing I guess to know is that my wife does not understand these cars at all, and she finds them uncomfortable. And comfort is sort of her number one priority when it comes to being in a vehicle. So also, I don't have that option. She will not come touring with me. We don't get to do nice little drives and things like that. So again, that's just to give you a little bit of context for how I use these cars. Now I'd like to summarize the pros and cons of driving the Alfa Romeo 4C or the Lotus Elise for either touring or for daily driving. Both the Lotus Elise and the Alfa Romeo 4C can be used for touring and for daily driving, but it all depends on what you're willing to compromise in order to drive and experience these amazing cars. In terms of pros and cons, the Lotus is definitely louder in the cabin. Both cars are comfortable. In fact, I've always been surprised at how comfortable it is to be in both of these cars for long periods of time. The only exception would be the fact that there's no cruise control on the Lotus Elise, so it does kind of tax your ankle. The cabins of these two cars are pretty snug, but the Lotus Elise is a little bit more snug. You're basically shoulder to shoulder with your passenger. The Lotus feels exotic and exciting, whereas the Alfa Romeo feels a bit more refined, elegant, and luxurious. The Lotus Elise has more storage in the boot. The heating and the air conditioning work much better in the Alfa Romeo 4C, and the cabin is sealed much better against the elements and against sound. The Lotus Elise does not have cruise control. That's a big deal for me. See this top 5 video. And both cars are very reliable, although the Alfa Romeo 4C can be a little bit more finicky because of its more modern electronics. See this video for some of the challenges I've had with phantom engine codes. For daily driving, and especially for things like volleyball or maybe even golf, one of the best things you can do is just use the passenger seat. So for volleyball, I got this gigantic duffel bag. I think it's 4 feet long, and in this I can put my camp chair and, in fact, my entire volleyball bag or anything else that I might need. You can just tuck this thing right in here in the passenger seat. The other absolutely essential item is to have a hat and to have sunglasses. And the reason I say that is because the visors, the sun visors in both of these cars are next to useless. So the sun visor in the Lotus Elise It's basically about this big. It's like maybe 2 packs of cards, not even as wide as a pack of cards. And it flips down. It's really not blocking anything. You can't flip it to the side. And so really you need sunglasses, but more importantly, a hat with a visor. And I use this as my sun visor, right? So depending on where the sun's coming at me, I will tilt this, the way that it needs to be tilted to block the sun. And this is absolutely the best solution. But I have found this wonderful caddy. So after years of driving around and putting things in the seat, and then as I have fun driving, having those things fly off or fly toward my feet or whatever, I found this wonderful caddy. And you fasten it to the seat belt. It's got a Velcro strap in the back here, so it's not going anywhere, right? It can move a little bit, but it's not going to fly off. And since there's no real practical cup holder, I just get a thermos and I can stick that in here. I've got 2 different sizes of thermos, but they all fit in there very nicely. If I go to my favorite burger joint, I can just put the greasy bag in here rather than on the nice leather seats of the car, and it protects them. And I've really found this caddy to be fabulous. So I keep all kinds of things in here. I keep an OBD2 reader, I keep some tissues, some cash, my sunglasses, gloves, extra charging cables and a charger, all kinds of stuff. And on a long trip, you can put all your snacks in there. It's just extremely practical and handy. So to share with you some of the things that I have done with these cars, so when I first bought the Lotus Elise, I bought it near Chicago and then drove it all the way to North Carolina. And that was a heck of a drive. I remember one of the first things was the owner asked me if I was going to wear earplugs on the trip because the car is pretty loud in the cabin and the exhaust is pretty loud. I decided not to. The other thing I remember is that shortly after leaving his place, the cup holder, which I'll show you a little later, fell off at my feet. And so I was trying to drive the car, manipulate the gas and the brake and clutch while this thing was laying at my feet. So until I was able to pull over and put it aside. This is the cup holder that comes with the Lotus Elise. And it slides on a little track under here. And there's a little stop. In fact, it's still sitting here 8 years after I bought the car because it broke as I was driving home, just leaving the seller's house. This thing fell out onto the ground by my feet. So I've never tried to reinstall it. I just figure it's pretty useless. That trip was about this time of year, so it was in November, and so the weather can be kind of sketchy between Chicago and North Carolina. And I remember passing over the mountains of West Virginia that I hit freezing rain and black ice, and I was in a panic. I was like, oh crud, I'm going to total this car that I just bought. Oh my goodness. So thankfully I made it okay and everything turned out fine, but that was a bit scary. Other trips I've taken in the Lotus included a trip down to South Carolina to the BMW Performance Driving School, as well as going to the Virginia International Raceway for a charity laps event, but I haven't actually tracked this car, and it's something I would still like to do. Now the Alfa Romeo, on the other hand, I have tracked multiple times. So I've been to VIR for that same charity laps event. This was a different one, different year, but same type of event. I've taken it to a Ken Kirkingham track day at VIR, and we also rented, myself and 9 other friends, a private racetrack here in North Carolina, and I took the Alfa Romeo out there, so that was a lot of fun. And that's not to mention the several joyrides that I've taken here locally with some other 4C owners. As the opening here, okay? Now even with this very large duffel, there is some space over here. So as I'm recording this video, it's actually Thanksgiving Day, and I'd intended to record this earlier in the week, but we've had rain, and so this is my first opportunity. And I was all set up to record before we were supposed to have guests, but then our guests decided to come early, which we welcomed very much. So I just had to go ask my son and my son-in-law to stop using their overpowered airsoft rifles because it was being captured on the video. So anyhow, I'm going to try and wrap up this video as quickly as possible so that they can get back to their fun and so that I can get back to my guests.